Thank you for joining us on the New Bridge Radio Show. You can also catch us online at newbridgeradio.com. Find us on Facebook under New Bridge Radio Show or follow us on Twitter at New Bridge Radio. Now let's connect you with what's next.
Welcome back to the New Bridge Radio Show on WLTK-DB. Let's talk. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we are connecting you to what's next in your life. And we're here to remind you that you are important to this world, and we sure are glad to have you along on this episode of the New Bridge Radio Show. Remember, if you would like to get in touch with our show, you can email us. Our email address is thenewbridgeradioshow@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would like to know what you like about our show, and we would like to know if you would like to be a guest on our show, because we love connecting with people who have connected with what was next in their life. You never know who you could help with your story, no matter how small or how big. We'd love to hear from you, and we could put your show on your story on the radio. So if you would like to have a distant Reiki session or an intuitive reading with me, you can set that up through my website. My website is www.limestreetwellness.com. All you need to do is just click Book Online in the upper right-hand corner. And if you use the promo code BRIDGE, you can get 15 minutes or 15% off your session. That's www.limestreetwellness.com. Tonight, we have a special guest tonight. She probably isn't one in a million. She may just be one in a billion. She has one of the most unique spiritual stories ever. And I'm so glad we were able to get her on our show. She is Devi Nina Bingham, and she is a writer from Tucson, Arizona. And she has written this amazing book that is channeled called Messages from Metatron, A Course in Self-Transformation. She is also the host of her own podcast where she conducts a Metatron's podcast study group on Quantum CView Network. Welcome to the show, Nina Bingham. Nina, thank you for coming. Thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm really honored to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad I got to have you. You know what? I'm going to kind of start in an odd place, Nina, because as I've come to know you, I've come to know that the two of us have something. Well, we have a lot of things in common, but there's something that the two of us also have in common. And it kind of leads to the book. So I want to ask you this question.
Sure.
The one thing that we have in common is we both know the name of our guardian angel. And I'm curious to know how you came to know about yours and how you came to work with yours.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that everybody has a guardian angel. And I think that we also have something called spirit guides, who are people who have lived and then, before taking another body, they're in another dimension, but they're helpers basically. But I also believe that we do have angels, and it's interesting because America pretty much believes in guardian angels. Even people who don't go to church believe in guardian angels. So angels are actually really popular. And so how I got to know my guardian angel's name was I had a friend who, did all this kind of esoteric work and stuff, actually before I even got into all of this. And she asked me one time if I believed in guardian angels. And I said, yeah, I was raised in church and yeah, I believe in angels. And then she said, well, do you know their names? And I was like, well, how would you know that? And she said, well, why don't you just ask them? Just, like that. That's probably the easiest and best way. Just ask them what their names are and be open to hearing it. Just, do a little meditation or whatever you do to tune in and, just be open to hearing it. And because I am intuitive as well, I thought, well, I could probably do that. it's funny to me that I'd never just thought about just asking them for it, you know?
Right.
Like, we think that we have to do all this crazy stuff, stand on our head, light 10 candles.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a matter of asking. And so
Mhm.
I did it. I just, went into meditation and I asked for a name. And the first name that popped up was just almost immediately was Michael. And I thought, oh, that's crazy because my son, that's what I named him, was a
Mhm.
Michael. And then the next thought that came to me was, well, where do you think you got that idea?
Mhm.
So it's like, maybe I gave you that idea. And that's why
Mhm.
his name is Michael. And I was like, wow. I mean, I had no idea that they could influence us like that. I think they can.
Uh,
So, so when I pray, when I meditate, I talk to Michael a lot.
mhm.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, my story is very similar of how I found the name of my guardian angel. I was told very similar information as you were, Nina, that all you got to do is just ask your guardian angel for their name, and it will come to you. And this was probably some time ago that I was. I had asked the question, and it took a while for it to come. It wasn't like, years or anything. I didn't ask for the name and then, a decade later, oh my God, it's the name.
Mhm.
There was a short space of time for me to come and know the name of my guardian angel. And it was an unusual name and I will never forget it. It came out, my guardian angel's name is Tipper. And so I was like, oh, did I
Mhm.
hear that right? Is
Mhm.
that your name? And it was like, and you know how kind of when you have kind of a spiritual experience, a spirit kind of touch you and kind of acknowledge something, you kind of get chill bumps,
Mhm.
all down your in your throughout your being. And when I said the name, I'm like, oh yeah, 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 that's the name. And I do address my guardian angel by that name, and I always, when I have certain things that I need an answer to, I will say yes. And after I found the name, now I think I kind of knew about my guardian angel, but once I knew the name of my guardian angel, that's when I really started to ask more questions and talk more to him. Did you have the same sort of experience?
Yeah, I had never. It's funny that we don't think about it, that here's this being who, you know, uh, from birth to death, who sees
Right.
us from birth to death. I mean, really, they're our BFF for life. I mean, they are stuck
Right.
to us like glue. They
Hmm.
protect us, they try to communicate with us. So it's weird that we don't think about communicating with them. And I believe we also have spirit guides too. But actually, I have two that I know of. I have two
Hmm.
angels. The other one, Metatron, was actually the angel who told me about this other angel. And this angel has a funny name. This angel's name is Rory, Rory. I'd never heard that name before. I didn't even know if it was a male or female name,
Hmm.
Rory, but I guess it's an Irish name. And it can be male or female. But what I found out is that it's a female.
Hmm.
So, and it's interesting about gender too. Um, I found out with angels because they can present um, being either male or female. Because really, angels don't have a gender; they're androgynous because they're not human beings, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but they can present to us in one form or another. And so she presented to me as a female. Her name was
Hmm.
Rory, and he said what her function was. She wasn't so much in charge of me. Michael was. Like, Michael's been with me forever, not just this life, but lots of lives. But Rory's job was to help me write this book. That's what he told me. So that's all I
Interesting.
know is I've got two.
Well, you know something? I'm familiar with Archangel Metatron as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for me, he kind of was introduced to me because I am someone who is hyperactive, and
Mm-hmm.
Archangel Metatron has a way of fixing that, or at
Mm,
least stopping it for a time. But I was curious. I think there are a certain set of qualities that kind of draw
mm,
Archangel Metatron to you, and I'm curious to know if
mm,
you have these in your experience. But what I find amongst people who kind of pull Metatron into their experience, and we probably should. Oh, before
mhm.
you answer this question, we probably should tell people who Metatron is, because I know a
Sure.
lot of people are familiar with archangels, but they're not always familiar with Metatron. But I found that
Yeah.
people that draw Metatron have a desire for absolute freedom in their experience. They're like, I just want to
Mm.
know, I want to know freedom as much as I can in this experience. And I'm just kind of curious, was that sort of like your vibration, or what you felt was one of your main missions, is freedom?
Yes. Yes. Yes, and yes. Well, I'm an Aquarius, and Aquarians are known, I guess you could say, for being extremely independent and liking to try different things and are risk takers. And that's definitely my personality for sure.
Mhm.
Mhm. So I don't know why Metatron called on me to do this book, and then I had a second book that I channeled, which was 10 archangels. So I've channeled 11 of them, and I don't really know honestly why me, except that I can say I'm sure it has something, like you said, to do with my personality, because I'm very open minded, and I think that may draw Metatron, because
Mhm.
Metatron is he's the archangel that's the boss of the archangels. He's the top archangel. He's the most powerful of archangels,
Mhm.
um and so he's got a vast vault of knowledge. He's the keeper of the Akashic record, which is everything that's ever happened in our universe is stored in this record, and he keeps that record. So he has something, a lot to do with that. So he's the keeper of time, basically, and
Mhm.
what happens in time. So he's a very powerful archangel. There's no doubt about that. So I think that he's going to tap somebody on the shoulder who has an open mind, because he's got a lot to say.
Yes. So I have a Reiki studio here in a town here in Washington,
Mm,
and so this is one of the things that Archangel Metatron is very good at helping me with.
mhm,
Besides connecting me to people who are, freedom seekers and who have a similar mission. So I. This is a terrible thing to confess, Nina, but I am terrible at giving directions. And have been that way, the majority of my life. I am terrible.
uh-huh,
And so, if I get people calling me, I can't find the studio, I can't find your building. Like I had one guy in particular who couldn't find my building and was lost and was telling me where they were. I'm like, I really am not sure how to guide you, but I'm going to ask an angel, Archangel Metatron, to come and get you and bring you here
mhm,
as soon as we hang up. And and in the instances, well, that particular person, that particular client, when I sent Metatron to him, he ended up showing up at my studio maybe 8 minutes later. And he was like, well, I figured it out. I was like,
wow,
okay.
that's quick.
Right. Right. So
That's awesome.
he is the, but what is interesting about you is you were living a pretty pretty much like a normal life, um and then you had some very tough circumstances that came in and sort of started this process for you, the channeling. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Yeah. So uh so let me rewind to a real turning point in my life. And that was the death of my teenage daughter. So I don't know if you've read my autobiography, but it's called Once the Storm is Over, From Grieving to Healing After the Suicide of My Daughter. And so in 2013, my daughter, who was on antidepressants and who had been severely depressed for about 4 years, I mean, severely depressed, she took her own life after 4 years. She went off of the medication without telling anybody. And unfortunately, it was one of those medications that you can't cold turkey like that. So that it happened fast, like within 3 days, she was gone. And she was 15 years old. And when that happened, it took me about a year to just get my bearings.
Right.
And at the time, I had a mental health. I'm a mental health counselor, so I had a mental health practice. I was practicing in Portland, Oregon, and it was a bustling practice. I mean, I was jam packed. I was, doing good business, and then it was just like the world turned upside down. And
Right.
so I decided there was no way that I could, be a healer when I needed the healing. And so I closed my practice because, I tried. I mean, I tried to, but this is one of those things when you lose a child that you can't power your way through.
Exactly.
It's just not going to work that way. And it's a process. It takes a long time to grieve like that. And I felt like, okay, well, I'll try to power through it at first. I think I went back to work about 3 weeks after that happened. And I remember Kevin sitting across from my first client in the morning. She was a new client to me. And she started talking about losing her husband, that she had just lost her husband and that she was grieving. And there was big tears rolling down her face. And then I started to cry. And here we are sitting there crying. And she said, well, why are you crying? And I said, well, I am feeling with you right now. And she said, well, what's going on? And I said, well, I just lost my teenage daughter. And she was like, oh my God, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm trying to run a practice. And she took my hands in her hands and she said, go home.
Mhm.
Go home, honey, go home. It's time to heal. And it was like, having a client look at me, the mental health therapist, and say, you're in the wrong place. You need to be home and you need to be healing. So I closed my practice after that. I knew that I was, needed the healing. And I started to see a psychologist, which really helped. And
Mhm.
he helped me understand that it wasn't my fault, that she went off of these antidepressants, that they caused this reaction in her. Um, and that I couldn't have controlled that. And so he helped me work through that grief. So about a year after that, Kevin, I had a supernatural experience where I believe my daughter visited me. I had a visitation from her. And it's in the book. I could go into all the stuff that happened, but it was pretty striking. It was definitely her. Got my attention. And all she said to me, she was a very quiet girl, very quiet,
Mhm.
studious girl. And the only thing she said was just one sentence, because she came in the middle of the night, once I was awake and terrified. She said, Mama, listen for the voice. Listen for the voice that comes. And I was like, what is she talking about? I had no idea. And that's all she
Right.
said to me. There was no, I love you. There was no, I'm sorry. I mean, that was it. Just listen for the voice, Mom. And then she was gone, like boom, boom, just like that. And I thought, okay, she came to give me this message. There's going to be some kind of a voice, a message that comes to me. And so in 2015, about a year after her visitation, I got a visit from Metatron. And but you know what? Before I tell you about that, I want to say a few more things about angels. And this is
Sure. Sure.
important. For those people who don't know if they believe in angels or if they're kind of on the fence about it, the word angel translates from the Greek as messenger. Messenger. So that's what their name actually means. And the word archangel means chief angel. So Archangel Metatron is the chief of the archangels. He's the boss. And you know, archangels are not cute, cuddly cherubs that are like depicted in art, you know. In fact, the first thing that archangels say to humans is, don't be afraid of me. In the Bible, it describes people who saw them, and it says, you know, they fell on their faces. That sounds like fainting to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never seen an angel, nor do I want to see one, because the real ones can be frightful to humans. I have seen paranormal phenomenon that accompanied the archangel's messages. It'd be interesting to talk about that. But I hear them, which is known as clairaudience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a psychic gift, and I've had it since I was a child. And so channeling is what it's called when you're clairaudient and you can hear well enough, you know, to write books of
Mm-hmm.
messages, and that's called channeling. So it took 3 years to compile. I got 30 messages from Metatron. And then I wrote a study guide that's included in the book. And that's the study guide is what we use in our podcast.
Right.
We study that together, you know, on the radio. But here's a good, interesting definition of channeling that I've ever heard. I really love this definition. It's, quote, channeling is the ability to tune out the external world and tune into your internal wisdom. Your internal wisdom. And I thought that was really good.
That is good.
So that's how it all started.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you started that way. I have, like you, I haven't seen that many archangels. I've seen two of them. The last one that I saw was Archangel Sandalphon,
Oh,
and
yes.
I've never seen
He's called the
Archangel.
tall archangel. Was he
Yeah,
tall?
yes.
That's what he's
um,
called in the Bible, the tall archangel. Okay, yeah.
yes, he is really tall. And I was doing a Reiki session for a nurse, and this was, you know, this was recently. This was a couple of years ago during the pandemic, and this, and I, you know, as I'm doing Reiki on this nurse, I can tell that she's exhausted for one, and just drained. And as I'm going through this Reiki session, all of a sudden I see this huge, huge gold being, like huge,
Mm.
and just probably one of the biggest, you know, one of the biggest spiritual beings I have ever seen come in to assist in the Reiki session.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And he did tell me, you know, that his name was Sandalphon. And I'm like,
Mm.
um, and he assisted me in that little Reiki session. I will never forget it. You know what was interesting about it is Sandalphon brought such a peace into that session. And it was really quite a gift, not only for me, but for the person who was receiving Reiki. I was like, yeah, anytime. And I have seen Archangel Michael, but when I saw Archangel Michael, it was an unusual circumstance that I still don't understand to this day. But I saw Archangel Michael in human form. And it was a strange experience, Nina, because of all places in the whole world, it happened. It happened at a 7-Eleven. And it was the night I had decided, okay, universe, I will become a Reiki healer. And that was the night that I
Oh.
saw him. And I was at 7-Eleven, and the door opens to 7-Eleven, and this teenage kid walked in. And when I looked, I felt an energy come off this being right away. And when I felt it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not a person. This person
Mm.
has such intense energy. And
Mm-hmm.
when I had that thought of this person has such an intense energy, this teenager looked right at me and smiled. And when
Mm.
I saw their eyes, I was like, oh, this is definitely not a human being, because their eyes were bright, bright, bright blue. And I was like,
Mm.
this is definitely somebody else, and he was walking around the store. I don't know what he was doing there, and he was walking around the store, and I'm standing there, and I'm kind of intimidated to look back at him to see, is he behind me? What is he doing? And then all of a sudden he walked through the line of people, and he turned and went out the door, but he turned back and he looked right at me and he smiled again. And I was like,
Mm.
that was weird. And then somebody else another friend was talking about a time that they had seen Archangel Michael, and he looked like a teenager, and he was wearing a ball cap. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. I have seen
Mm.
Archangel Michael myself at a time where I was. It was really at a pivotal time where just about everything in my life was about to change, and I think that's always kind of when you're going to see archangels or be
Mhm.
assisted by them.
It's interesting that you saw him. Well, funny to me that you saw him at a 7-Eleven. That is so Michael, and that you saw him embodied as a teenager. That is so Michael. Michael is a character. He's just a character, and he's super powerful, but he's also funny. He's got.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how I knew him. Is that he's the most powerful archangel. He's the most what's the word? Dangerous, maybe archangel, but he is so humble. He is
Right.
so understated. But
Mhm.
he's also like one of those guys that if challenge him to, he's going to put you on the mat like that fast. So
Right.
that's his, specialty is being a warrior.
Right.
But it's funny because he's got a great sense of humor, so he does this job that's like a cop almost, it's a tough job in the spirit
Mhm.
world. But when you get him alone, he's a really funny guy and he likes to cut up and stuff. So it's interesting to me that he on a very important day in your life, that he
Yeah.
milled around that store so that you could see him for sure. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing about his eyes is that his color is blue. Like all of the angels have different colors. And when when they came to me for the second book, his was blue for sure. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that he had really, really blue eyes.
Yes, he had very, very blue eyes. And you know what? Whenever it comes time for protection, I always, ask Archangel Mike for protection, and
Mhm.
and y- he is very serious about it. And there's a place I used to work nights, and there's a place here in Bothell that is weird. I don't like, and on the way home, at night, I would always have to drive through this area, and it's kind of in a highly spiritual place, you know, and there's a lot of activity in certain parts of Bothell. And this particular place has a ton of fatal accidents, and it's always really misty at night. And whenever I drove, before I would drive through there, I would always ask Archangel Michael, I don't want to go through there without you. And I would always wait until I felt him, and then I would drive through it. And it's a huge hill. So I feel like when you ask him for protection, he's 100% serious about it.
Yeah, that's his major job is
Yeah.
protection and fighting, dark forces. So he knows all about that. He's the champion of
Yes, he
that.
does.
So
And
he's the absolutely perfect one for that.
yeah, and my whenever I'd ask him for help, I used to have a golden retriever, and I would ask Archangel Michael to come and clear a space for me. And it was funny, whenever he would come, my golden retriever would just start looking up. She'd be like, "Oh, you called in the big guy again." She would just stare up at him.
Yeah, I believe that animals do see the spirit realm that we can't see. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
just animals and insects and everything. They see a lot of what we don't have vision to see, and I believe it has to do also with dimensions. So I think that they do see a lot of stuff because I watch my dog. What is? It's not a fly. I mean, there's nothing there. He's looking around, and sometimes he'll growl if there's something that's not supposed to be here. So yeah, I think they have that intuition, or they can see one or the other.
Absolutely. So, what's interesting about what I liked about your story is how you started channeling, and I do channeling through automatic writing as well.
Mhm.
And there's a little something, that's kind of unexplainable about how that process takes place.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't always just, it's not always just words. Like, it's not always just words. It's kind of concepts are coming to you. And as you're doing it, there's a thing that is in you that kind of does it. And what was interesting is as I was reading your channel material, I was like, oh, this was channeled because that channeling thing in me is saying the things as I'm reading this. So that was
Mm.
interesting about the book, and it's interesting how you got to the point where you were kind of comfortable working in the modality. So tell us a little bit about how everything started there.
Right. So I was totally against doing this. I was a mental health
Right.
counselor. I was
Right.
respectable. I mean, I had a
Right.
big practice. And then how do you tell, your clients, "Oh, I wrote a book." "Oh, really? Is it a mental health book?" "No, it's a book on angels." Well, tell me more about that book. And you're like, ugh. So when Metatron came to me and proposed this whole deal, I just said no. I mean, flat out. I just said, actually, what I said is, you can't make me.
Oh, wow.
That's what I said. And he basically said, "Oh, you want to bet?" So, yeah, you never want to basically dare an angel, because they are so much more powerful than we are, and they're so much smarter than we are, and they know us so well. It's like they
Exactly.
know the places to pressure places on us to make us give in, and that's what he did. He just kept his pressure on me until I gave in, basically. And so the first time he came to me, it was the middle of the night, because there is this period, I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure that our viewers are aware, that between about 2 and 3:30, right in there, is this really sweet spot when, if you're going to get a visitation from an angel, or from a spirit guide or another being, it'll probably be during that time. Just because, as I understand it, like the physics of it is the atmosphere during that time is like thinner, if I could say it that way. And so it's easier for them to manifest. They don't need as much energy to manifest during that time. So anyway, it was about 3 or 3:30 when the first time he came to me, and I was, dead asleep, and I just felt, like something wake me, and I don't know what it was, and I woke up, and I'm laying there thinking, okay, why am I awake? Something woke me up, I think. And then I just heard this voice in my head that was so loud. And it was like, "Hi, it's me. It's time to channel. Get up now." And I was like, hello, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got to work tomorrow. Um, One thing about angels and archangels is they don't give a hoot about time. They
Right.
don't care what time it is here. If they've got something to say, or a mission, or a message, they'll get you up. They don't really care too much about your problems with time. Okay, because it's
Right.
our problem, not their problem. So anyway, he got me up, and I was like totally exhausted. And he said, "Make a strong pot of coffee." So I did. I made some coffee. He said, he was really nice about it. He said, "Get comfortable, honey." And I got comfortable. And he said, "I just want you to, lay down, just like you would at a, psychotherapist's office. You lay on the couch, just lay down and just relax. And I want you to turn on your little recorder and record what you're going to say." And I thought, well, this is nuts. I mean, because I didn't have anything in my mind. There was nothing. I was 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm exhausted. I have nothing in my mind to say. So I lay down, and I'm just laying there thinking, this is crazy. And then it's like, I just had this boom. It felt like a wave, that comes into your mind, and it's not only words, but it's also pictures that go with the words, and so that I could visualize what he was telling me. the concepts that he was talking about. Because a lot of the concepts in the book are metaphysical. And at that point, I didn't know anything about metaphysical stuff. I had no idea.
Mhm.
I didn't even have an interest in it. So it just kind of started flowing out of me. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I'm talking, but I'm talking in a voice that sounds like a male.
Mhm.
And not only does it sound like a male, it sounds like a man. Like and it sounded like kind of old school, like really old, kind of like you'd think old English, kind of. That's the way he talked. And it was like listening to a professor, like
Mhm.
professor, a very, very smart professor. And so he's just, he started, just saying hello, hello from heaven to everybody down there. And he just started, I'm here to, give you greetings. And I mean, he just started from the beginning, kind of greet everybody and go from there.
Mhm.
And so the session took about, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then it was just like when I was really getting tired because I had to get up in the morning, he was really sensitive to that. He knew. He just knew, oh, she's getting tired now. She's really tired. And he just stopped. He just stopped and he said, "Thank you." And he went away. Boom, gone.
Mhm.
Go to bed now. And I was just like, wow, I had like 15 or 20 pages that I'd written, or
Mhm.
well, that I'd spoken. And so the next morning I got up and I thought, well, I don't know, what do you do with this, right? But I'd written other books, I published other books. I know I'm a writer. And so I thought, well, okay, I want to start collecting these little messages and, like weave them all together. And that's what I did. And so I got 30 in a space of 3 years, but
Mhm.
the majority of them came in the middle of the night. I would say 80%.
Mhm.
80% of them. And also though, what helped me is that at some point, I think it was maybe like, I don't know, like a third of the way into the book, I was, getting tired because what I had to do was record these and then I had to write them out, or type them. But I like to write things. So I'm old school that way. So I wrote things out and then I would have to type it into the book that I was starting. Well, that's kind of a
Mhm.
big process, right? And it was very time consuming. And so rather than do that, at one point, what he said was, I want you just to write. I don't want you to speak anymore. I just want you to write. And I'm like, but I don't know what to write. And he said, it'll be the same. You'll know exactly what to write. And I was like, okay. And, that's what I did. And I'll be darned if it didn't work the same way. And I just, when I do this kind of writing, it's real fast. Like I don't have time to think. That's how fast. Like I literally can't almost keep up with it. It's just like throwing up. It's like fast, 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 fast until you're done. You know, like
Right.
writing as fast as you can write with this huge, writing that's terrible. Um, for about, I don't know, an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So that's called automatic writing. And it's amazing what people have been able to get through automatic writing.
Mhm. When I was first starting to do it, sometimes the spirit folk would use Siri on my phone.
Hmm.
Like I was sitting there late one night in the beginning when I was first starting to do automatic writing myself. I was sitting there. I was watching a television show, and watching it, and all of a sudden Siri says, I'm the only one in the living room, and all of a sudden Siri says, "Time for training." What? And
Wow.
so and when that happened, I was like, oh, okay, I'll go and start doing it. And what was interesting is when I first started doing automatic writing,
Hmm.
I had done a little like a little meditation of to do the automatic writing, and I was very skeptical about it at first. I was really, this is hooey. This isn't going to work, and people are going to think I'm crazy. But anyway, but I went and started doing the automatic writing, and and there was a picture in my mind, uh, and it was Jesus.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is unusual. I'm like, I thought we were kind of mad at each other. And he was like, no. So I start doing this automatic writing. He's like, Kevin, this is going to be an unusual day. And it was all this writing that, of what was going to come in the next couple of days. And he's like, it's going to start today, and it's going to be today's going to be an unusual day, but it will be an extremely good day for you. And when you come back this evening, you'll sit here at this desk and you'll be like, oh, yeah, you'll see that I was absolutely right about this. And so that's kind of how it started for me. And
Wow.
and doing the automatic writing journey, I was like shocked that it did, that it worked like this.
Mhm. A lot of people talking about automatic writing and hearing from your angels. This is all intuition stuff, right?
Right.
And uh, I want to just discuss this psychic gift for a second because for the listeners or the viewers, while it's amazing, I mean, I'm even amazed by it. I
Right.
don't really even understand how channeling happens. I mean, I really don't even get it. But I do believe everybody has intuition. However, not everybody's going to develop their intuition. Um, so even though I'm intuitive, I'm also a woman of science. I'm working on my second master's degree. Um, if science can prove to me that no other dimensions exist, if it can prove that there are no angels, then I wouldn't believe in them because
Right.
I believe in science. And but physics says that there may actually be things like parallel universes and other dimensions. And that's the latest. That's the latest in physics. See, people don't believe in what we call the supernatural because they can't see it.
Right.
They can't see it. But the air you breathe is invisible and you can't touch it, you can't taste it, but without it, right, you'd be dead. So the quantum world, yeah, and the quantum world is real, right? But you can't perceive it, can you?
Exactly.
So when someone says they can't believe in angels or other dimensions or aliens or all this stuff, automatic writing or channeling, because they haven't seen it, I would say to them that they don't understand quantum mechanics. Because
Exactly.
Stephen Hawking, a quantum physicist, is one of the greatest minds, and he believed in the multiverse theory.
Hmm.
So he believed in scientific hypotheses that can't be proven yet
Hmm.
by the scientific method. So if Stephen Hawking's mind was open to the possibility of other dimensions, why can't we be open? Why can't we open our minds too? And
Exactly.
so but before intuition can be developed in somebody, there has to be an open mindedness. And if there's no open mindedness, then you can't be taught anything. So, we can be skeptical. I think it's good to be skeptical. We should be skeptical people. We should always look for the science in things, but also keep an open mind. I call myself an open minded skeptic. An open
Right. Me
minded
too.
skeptic. Yeah, because I'm open to the possibility that there may be intelligent life on other planets. And if these are higher level beings, if these angels are higher level, the spirit guides, it makes sense that they can communicate with us. If they're
Right.
higher level beings than we are and they have more technology than we do. So the first step in becoming a clear channel is getting rid of the word impossible.
Right. And trusting yourself. And I know for me, there came a time where something appeared on the page, and I'm like, that definitely didn't come from me. That's way beyond my knowledge or know-how. And you know what was interesting, Nina, is sometimes those messages would come through, and it would seem like, oh, that was that's nothing. And then a week or two later, you would go back and your log that you channeled this in, and it would be right. It would hit you right in, right in the gut, like, oh, this is exactly what I needed right now at this time. Hey, you know what? I just got a note here that we have some questions from listeners that wanted to know something from you. We have a question here from Casey, and she wants to know, where did you get your sound healing certificate?
Oh, yes. So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and also a sound therapist. There is
Mhm.
a institute in Europe actually that I got it through. I didn't go to Europe; I did it online. Um, let's see if I can find it. I will tell you what the name of this place is. Hang on just a minute. I'm going to grab it for her.
All right.
Okay. And I don't know if they still offer these courses. They're called the Center of Excellence, and they're in the United Kingdom. And so what
Mhm.
I did is I combined, this online course for sound therapy, and then I had a friend who had an acupuncture business, and she'd been an acupuncturist for like 25 years or longer. And when I told her that I was doing the sound therapy, she's like, "Oh, because acupuncturists are starting to use the tuning forks rather than needles. Not all the
Mhm.
time, but with some patients." And she said, "If you will teach me how to use the tuning forks, I'll teach you the body. I'll teach you where to put the tuning forks."
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, "Yeah, you got a deal." And then we used her
Mhm.
studio, and she taught me basically, the very basics of acupuncture so that I could use the tuning forks in that way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much tuning forks work. I'm a hypnotist as well, and tuning forks can really help people relax for hypnosis too. And it's amazing how they do that.
hmm
And
oh, go ahead.
oh, no, 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 you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I practiced with the tuning forks specifically once I retired from the psychotherapy practice and the hypnosis practice. I started doing, that's when I picked up sound therapy. And so I had a little practice on the side doing that in my friend's studio, her acupuncture studio. And I learned a lot, doing that for about a year.
Mhm.
What I learned is that it's really best, at least this was my experience. Maybe other people are going to have different experiences. It's really best for mental health issues. It works
Mhm.
fantastic for anxiety. It could take away anxiety with people who, were having serious anxiety or having anxiety disorders. It helped with depression, helped alleviate depression. It helped tremendously with bipolar disorder.
Mhm.
So anything to do with the brain, any neurological problem, it treated very well.
Yes, 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 yes. So we have another question here. Also, it says, "Do you believe you chose healing, or do you believe healing chose you?"
That's a great question.
Hmm.
I think it's a combination. So I think what happens is we come to Earth, we incarnate, and we have a life chart, or maybe you call it a blueprint that we're going to follow. But we don't necessarily have to, we have a lot of choices in that blueprint. And, how we create our life is really up to us. I mean, really, truly, it is. We have so many smaller choices to make here that will direct our lives. So I think we do come in with a basic plan for our life. Like she's going to be, our gender, she's going to be a female. She's going to maybe get married a couple times. She's going to have some kiddos and she's going to have 3 dogs. And, she's going to be raised as a Christian and then she's going to convert to Buddhism. And then, I think those basic things are set before we come in. But I think we get to decide where we're going to, take the off ramp. So if I decide maybe I don't want to do that, I can choose something else and make my life go in a different direction. So I think it's a combination of both.
Exactly. I do too. Well, for myself, I kept, I joke about this a lot with people. I was like, when I started down this path, I was like, universe, you've got to be out of your mind. No. And then it started coming in and it started changing. And so much stuff had to be taken away out of me um, before I could be, effective at being a Reiki master, and then later hypnosis. So much. When I look back at the person that started, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the journey. Uh,
Mhm.
but in our last remaining time, I wanted to talk about the messages from Metatron, because it's really a course in spirituality that's channeled by an angel. And
Mhm.
not only can people read this in your book, but they can also follow along on your podcast. So tell us a little bit about those two things, about the study course and how you can, go into the CView network and hear these messages as well.
Yeah, so there's two ways that people can get involved and participate. The first way is if you're interested in getting the book. So you can find that on Amazon.com. Just look up Nina Bingham and you'll find messages from Metatron. You'll find that. And I've got a couple of other Archangel books there as well, and some mental health books and things like that. So you can get your book there. And then I podcast every other month. So we just did a podcast on transgenderism and same sex from the book. And so the next time we meet, we're going to talk about soulmates. Which will be a very interesting conversation. What are soulmates? How many do we have? What if my soulmate and I, we don't get along? So yeah, so we're going to talk about soulmates from the book. And so all you need to do to kind of get involved with the podcast is go to www.cview1111.net. And then you just look above in the tabs under shows and pull down the tab and you'll see my name. And click on that and you'll get to my show page. And then that will give you all the information you need to participate.
Mhm. I also found you on Apple Podcasts.
Yes.
So if you're a big Apple, if you find all your podcasts through Apple, you can find your podcast through there. So the other thing that I want to, in our remaining time, I want to ask you about the cover of the book. What was it about that picture that inspired you?
Yeah. I've had people, readers, give me feedback on it. Most people just love it. One lady said, that cover scared me to death. He looks so intense.
It is intense.
And he does. But Metatron is a very intense dude. So
Yes.
it fit him when I saw that. And where I got that is I was looking through stock photographs, because I wanted to find his face. It kept coming to mind that since it's his book, that his face should be on the front. Nothing else should be on the front. He should be on the front. He's the star. And so I'm looking through these stock photographs and I find one of this Viking statue, a Viking statue. And he's got this big beard and he's got these intense eyes. And I thought, oh my God, that's Metatron. I mean, that's
Mhm.
him. That's the way I see him in my mind. That's the picture I'd been seeing. And so I was just struck immediately. And I was like, wow, that's it. That's it right there. And so I took that picture that just like, it looked like a statue of stone. And I gave it to my graphic designer and I said, what do you think you could do with this? And he was like, oh, wow, that's intense. And I'm like, yeah, could you turn it into something that looks like an angel? And he said, I'd like to try. I said, okay,
Mhm.
great. And so he did a brilliant job, I think, of coming up with that rendition.
Absolutely. You know what, Nina? This hour has flown by. I
It
feel like we barely
has.
I feel like we barely scratched the surface. But anyway, I hope we can
Yeah.
have you on the New Bridge Radio Show again.
I'd love to come back. I'd love it.
Yes, yes. It's been an interesting hour. Well, that is going to do it for us here on the New Bridge Radio Show. I want to thank everyone for coming. There are some people who said hello in the comments. Hello, Angela. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming. And hello, Aaron. Hello, Sherry. And I want to thank you again, Nina, for coming and being our guest. I also want to thank my producer, Todd Bates, for everything he does and for keeping me on track. And that's going to do it for us on the New Bridge Radio Show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and tune in next week to the New Bridge Radio Show, where we connect you to what's next in your life.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTK-DB.com.